Okay, so now that we've gone through the TACAX configuration on the iOS side, we're going to go ahead and do the same configuration for the ASA firewall. And we're going to pretty much use the same setup from the ACS side. So we're not going to redefine the authorization profiles or the command sets. We're going to use the same ones and the same users. We're just going to go and configure the AA commands on ASA firewall. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to configure the ASA tree to integrate with ACS 1, which is this one, for TACAX command authentication, authorization and accounting, and also for session authentication. So I'm going to go on the ASA. The first difference as compared to the iOS is that I do not need to enable AA new model. I can just go ahead and say AA authentication, and I don't have a default. The ASA does not have something which are lists. I can specify the configuration per the method which I access the ASA. So I can enable authentication only for the SSH sessions, only for the telnet sessions, only, for example, for serial, which is the console. So if I want to enable authentication only for the telnet, I can do that. If I want to enable authentication only from the console or both, I can do that. And this is not based on a list, it's based on the command that you type in here. So let's say I want to say AA authentication telnet. And then by default I have telnet console. I have only the local option because I haven't yet defined any TACAX server. Now don't get confused about this console keyword. This has nothing to do with the console. It's just a keyword that is used on the command. I'm basically defining the authentication method for the telnet sessions, not for the console sessions. The same console keyword is also found if I want to do AA authentication SSH, for example, and I hit question mark, I need to type in the console keyword. So this is just a keyword, has nothing to do with the console authentication. Let's first go ahead and say AA server. Let's give it a name again, ACS TACAX. And let's say protocol TACAX plus. And then I'm going to say AA server. The name is ACS TACAX. I'm going to specify that it's reachable over the interface, which is VLAN 17. And then I'm going to say that the host is 172.16.1.100, which is the ACS. And I have a question mark. The most important option is the key, which I want to be again Cisco. And I want to say exit. Now, looking at the diagram, let's say that I want to test the session. I will telnet from switch 1. So to test the authentication, I will telnet from switch 1 to the SA. So let's go on the SA, and I want to say telnet. This is, so I want to say telnet 00 on VLAN 17. And then I want to, let's do a show name if. By default, I will not be allowed to telnet on any of the interfaces because the security level is too low, it's 0. So for example, if I go on switch 1 now, let's see show interface IP brief. And I want to telnet on this IP address of VLAN 17. So I say telnet on this one. It was 136.1.17.17. I see that the connection is not established. If I go on the ASA tree and I say show, I'm not sure if it's visible with this command, show ASP drop. It says telnet not permitted on list secure interface, and I have a matching 3 packets. Basically, the ASA does not allow clear telnet sessions on the lowest security level interfaces. In my case, because both interfaces of the ASA have the same security level, which is 0, which is the lowest, then I will not be able to telnet on any of the interfaces. So I need to go and, for example, raise the security level of VLAN 17 interface so I can actually telnet to the box. So I'm going to say conft That was the interface gig 01. So let's say configure terminal, and then I'm going to say interface gig01, and let's say security level 30 or whatever. So at this point, if I do a show name if again, I see that I have a security level of 30. So in this case, I will not be allowed to telnet on the VLAN 37 IP address, but I should be allowed to telnet on VLAN 17. So if I go on switch 1, I telnet again, this time it works, and I'm authenticated with the default password of Cisco. So now I am authenticated. I'm going to say exit. So let's go and see show run AAA server. So I configured the TACAC server. Now, if you want any keys that are hidden in the show run are visible with the command, which is more system running config, and you can say begin AAA server, and you should be able to see the clear text password, which is Cisco. And now let's say, so I enabled authentication with, enabled the integration with the ACS server, show run AAA. I have nothing configured so far. Let's say configure terminal, and let's say AAA authentication, telnet, console. And this time I'm going to choose the local the ACS server, which is ACS TACAX. So copy paste, and then with a fallback to the local database. Let's say also username Cisco, password Cisco, privilege 15. Now I've configured the user with a privilege level of 15, but what we're going to see is that this is not actually usable. Basically, as we're going to see when we do the integration with the ACS, or when we try to authenticate locally with a locally configured username, the ASA does not assign by default the session to privilege level 15. So it doesn't matter that if I authenticate with a user which has a local privilege level of 15 defined on the local user database, or if I authenticate with a user via the remote TACAC server, and the TACAC server pushes the privilege level of 15 to the session, the ASA will always assign the user session in privilege level 1. And from there, I need to use the enable command or the login command to perform a second authentication, and only at that moment I will be granted privilege level 15 access if the TACAC server assigns me, authorizes me for that access, or if I use the local authentication, if the username has that privilege level assigned. And then what I want to do is I want to say AAA, I want to do also accounting for the telnet, console, and let's say ACS TACAX. So the group would be ACS TACAX. And I also want to say AAA authorization command, and then ACS TACAX with a fallback of local. Now, if I do this, most probably I will get myself locked out of the console, because the authorization command, as you can see, first of all, it has nothing to do with the privilege level as it was on the iOS. So I'm just saying that I authorize any type of command through the remote TACAC server and with a fallback of local database. And this also affects the console, the VTI lines, and for example also the SDM access. But now, because I am not authenticating at the console, I will get myself locked out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure this command from a remote session, which will be, for example, from switch 1. And let's say that I also want to enable AA authentication, a serial. So the console authentication would be as well to ACS TACAX with a fallback of local in case the TACAX server is not available. So let's do show run AA. So I enabled only the authentication for the console and for the telnet sessions, and let's say also accounting for the console, AA accounting, serial, and then console ACS TACAX. Before I enable command authorization, let's go and actually do the integration with the ACS. So let's go on ACS, and let's add ASA 3 as a network access device. Most probably the session timed out, so I will need to re-authenticate in the ACS. Let's access it again. So I want to say ACS admin, default 1A, login. So I want to go to network resources and then to network devices and AAA clients, and I'm going to add ASA 3 with an IP address of 136.1.17.17 was that. Let's verify, show interface IP brief. So it was 136.117.17, and I'm going to use it also only with TACACS, and I'm going to say Cisco. So Cisco, and then submit. Let's go and look at the command authorization sets, because now the commands are different on the ASA. So the administrator command set had basically access to all of the commands. I don't want to do any changes in here, but the restricted command set was configured for the iOS. So the enable makes sense to have it. The show privilege I need to edit and do show current priv, because the command is different on the iOS, on the SA. Show car priv. I'm gonna say replace. And configure terminal, router EIGRP, I can leave that. Let's see if I already have router EIGRP enabled. Show run router, which I do. And I wanna say the network command, the passive, the debug, terminal monitor doesn't make sense for the SA, I can delete it. And exit, I can also delete that. And I can say submit. Let's make sure that the access policies are correctly configured. I go to the authorization, and the administrator rule says that if I'm the administrator user, then I get this command set, which is good. And then the restricted says that I'm going to get access to this shell and this command set, which is good. Just to see that the ASA is not capable of putting the user in the privilege level 15 on the forced authentication, let's go on the shell profile for the administrator. And let's say that when the administrator is authenticated, I want to put it in privilege level 15. And say submit. So now let's go on the ASA. Let's connect from switch 1, and let's say telnet this, and I'm going to use the administrator user, administrator, with a password of Cisco. So as you can see, I am not in privilege level mode, because although if we've configured the ASAs correctly, so if I look again on the ACS side, I should get access to privilege level 15. I am not. I need to do the second authentication through either the login command, which would be this, or through the enable command. And I want to specify the enabled password, which is this. So now if I say show current priv, then I'm good. Let's do show run AAA and basically enable the command authorization. Let's say AAA authorization command ACS TACACS with a fallback of local. So now it already says command authorization failed. Let's say disconnect 1. Let's authenticate again with the username of administrator and password of Cisco. Let's say enable and Cisco, show current priv. Command authorization failed. Let me look on the ASA tree on show run AAA, which again fails because the authorization command, the AA authorization command, which I typed in here, it globally affects the device. So this command globally affects the device. Let me look on the configuration side of ACS and make sure that the proper authorizations are applied. So the administrator is allowed to do any commands, and then in the access policies, on the authorization side, I say that if I connect with the administrator, then I'm going to get assigned to this shell and this command set. Let's go on the monitoring and report side, which would be this. And let's go on a protocol. On TACACS authorization to see that the commands issued by the user were received by TACACS. So it says subject not found in the applicable identity stores. Because I used the username of enable 15. So what I need to do, actually, this was for the console, basically, for the console access. But the administrator had access to this. Let me try and log in again from switch 1. So let's say disconnect 1, and let's turn it in again. And let's say administrator with a password of Cisco, and let's say login administrator with a password of Cisco. Login failed. The problem is that if we do a show current priv, it says authorization failed. Let's go again on ACS and see if I received the command from the ASA. So it says again the enable 15 and subject not found in the applicable identity stores, which pretty much means that the user that the ASA is using, it's enable 15 instead of the username. And this is because I didn't configure the AA enable functionality on the ASA. So basically, because I didn't configure the ASA with the AA authentication enable command, then basically when I do the enable functionality, the ASA will send actually the enable 15 command as the username, not the actual username in the command authorization set. So what I want to do is I want to go back on the ASA and configure the AA authentication enable command. But at this moment I cannot do that because I will fail the authorization. So let's go on the switch side, and for example, let's shut down the port with which leads to ACS. So disconnect 1, and I'm gonna say show run interface FA107. This is VLAN 24, and this is for ICE. Let me go on switch 2. So I'm going to go to switch 2, which would be this. And I want to go to show run interface FA107. This is the ACS port probably, which it is. And I want to say interface FA107 shutdown. And now I'm going to locally authenticate on the ASA. I'm going to say telnet from here to the ASA. And I'm going to locally authenticate with the user of Cisco and a password of Cisco. It will try and reach over to the ACS server. So at some point in here, I've configured a local username, which was Cisco with the password of Cisco and privilege level of 15. So it now tries to reach the ACS server, and then it will fail back to the local username database. And then I'm going to say enable, and again the password of Cisco, and I say conft, and this again takes a while because it tries to lively send the command to be authorized through the ACS server, which again will fail. It says that user enabled 15 not in local database because again the problem is that I didn't configure the AAA enable authentication on the SA3, and whenever I type in the enable command, what ends up happening is that it asks for the enabled password. So basically when I type in the enable command, it asks for the local enabled password, not for the user's enabled password, which means that all the users would actually be authenticated as enable 15, not as the actual username. So at this moment, I pretty much have nothing to do than basically to go and reload the ASA and type in the configuration again, because now I'm locked out of the box. So let me go on my rack in here, and I'm going to reboot ASA3, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so now the ASA is rebooted. Let's go again and try and telnet from switch 1 and authenticate. So I'm going to say telnet 136.1.17.17, and I'm going to authenticate with the administrator user, administrator, and password of Cisco. And I'm going to say enable and password of Cisco, show current priv, and I'm on privilege level 15, and based on the ACS configuration, I should be allowed to do pretty much anything. Let's say conf t, and let's say interface interface gig 01, for example, which I can do. So basically, previously the problem was that I didn't configure the enable authentication, which was this one. So if I do a show run AAA, now I've also enabled the enable authentication to be, which is this one, to be done through the TACAC server, and if that fails, to be done locally. By default, the enable authentication is done using the local enabled password. So what happened previously is that I was telnetting on a device, authenticated via TACAC with the administrator username and password of Cisco, but then when I typed in the enabled password, because the enabled authentication was using the locally enabled password, then I was authenticated with that, but actually the ASA was thinking that I'm authenticated locally with the enable 15 username, not with the actual username that I actually telnetted in. So now once that I have the authentication enabled configured, and when I say now enable 15 or just enable, then the ASA will send to the TACAC server an authentication request with the actual username that I'm typing in, which is administrator, and then I will get access to privilege level 15, and then command authorization will work as we've seen. Now if I go ahead and I telnet to switch one and let's say exit, and I telnet again, but now I'm using the restricted user to authenticate, restricted, and then the password of Cisco, and let's say enable. I think I already changed the current privilege for this one, So show car priv, it's still 1. So basically, as I said, the ASA will always put the session in privilege level 1. It doesn't matter what is the privilege level assigned on the TACAC server. I need to do enable, and then Cisco. Actually, I need to use the enable password, which was enable. Now, if I still show car priv, I'm at 15. And based on my configuration, let's go back on the ACS settings, where I've said that looking at the command set for this user, I said that the user is allowed to do the router EIGRP and the network commands on the router EIGRP, basically, in the passive interface. So let's go on the SA and let's say conft, and then router EIGRP 100. It's actually running in 200. That's the problem. Show run router to see the actual EIGRP process, which is, I cannot do this command. Let's look on the console on the ASA tree and say login, and I'm going to log into the administrator, and then the password of Cisco, and let's say show run router. I'm running in the EIGRP 111 process, so let's say router EIGRP 111. So I can access this. I can say network, for example, 1.1.1.1.0.0.0.0, which I can. I should also be granted access to the command passive interface. Let's say no passive interface, or passive interface. So let's say question mark. And let's say passive interface. Let's say VLAN 37. So I can do this. And I also can do the debug commands. But for example, if I want to do, let's say, exit, which again, the command failed because it was not allowed to me. Let's go to router OSPF, for example, 100, which again should not be allowed because command authorization failed. So let's go on the authorization logs in here. So let's say AA protocols, and we go under TACACS authorization. And we should see the last commands which failed, which were the router OSPF, the end, the exit, and the previous commands that were allowed, like the passive interface command, and then the network command under EIGRP, and the router EIGRP command. I want to show you also something else. So let's go in here and let's say show route. So I type in the show route command, which is not allowed. Let me type in show current priv, which this is allowed. And then let's go conft. So basically what I want to show you, router EIGRP 111 again. What I want to show you is that the ASA, I should see that the router EIGRP is accounted for on the ACS logs, but the show car priv command is not accounted for. So let's go on the ACS under the AA protocol, and then to TACACS accounting, and I should see here that the user, which was administrator, this is, let's go this way. So I see that the user administrator, I see only one command which was accounted for. Let's go on the right, and that was basically just the start session. Let's look if I correctly enable, let's go on the console, and let's see if I correctly enable the command accounting, show run AA. And I say AA accounting, I didn't enable the command accounting. So let's say conft, and let's say AA accounting. Let's say command privilege 1, and that would be on ACS TACACS. And also let's do it for privilege level 15. Already exists. So let's say show run AA now. And I said AAA accounting, command ACS TACAC. So basically for all privilege levels, the commands are counted at this moment. Let's go again and say conft, and also let's say router EHRP 111, and also let's say show carpriv. Now I should, when I go on the ACS logs, I should see both the configure terminal, the router EHRP 111, and the show current privilege command. But actually, because the ASA never accounts for the show type of commands, I should see only the configuration level commands. So this is a restriction of the ASA, and this is not configurable. There is nothing we can do about it. The ASA never sends in the accounting records the show type of commands. So let's go on the ACS logs now, and let's say protocol, and then go to TACACS accounting again. And then let's go see the commands. So I see that I type in the router EHRP command, the configure terminal command, and the AA accounting commands, but the show carpriv command does not show up. So I can basically do any type of show commands I want, like show route, or show running config if I want to. This will not show up in the accounting records. So I can go ahead again in the AA protocol, and then in TACACS accounting, and I should not see those commands available in here as accounting records, which I can. So I remained at the router EHRP command functionality.